A billionaire disguised himself as a struggling delivery driver, just to find out who would love him without his money. But when a black woman with nothing treated him with more dignity than anyone ever had, he realized the test wasn't about others, it was about himself. He thought he was searching for love, but instead, he found something far more dangerous, the truth about who he really was. And by the time he understood it, he was already one decision away from losing her forever. The city glittered like it had something to prove. From 48 floors above Manhattan, the lights stretched endlessly, gold, white, and neon, spilling across glass towers and weaving through the dark veins of the streets below. Yellow taxis moved like slow fireflies. Sirens hummed in the distance. Somewhere far below, a subway rumbled like a heartbeat beneath concrete. Ethan Cole stood barefoot on the balcony of his penthouse, one hand resting lightly against the cold steel railing. The night air brushed against his face, carrying the faint scent of rain and exhaust. He didn't move. He barely blinked. Behind him, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Italian marble floors, a grand piano no one played, art pieces that cost more than most people's homes. Everything was in its place, perfectly arranged, perfectly clean, perfectly empty. Ethan stared out at the skyline, but his eyes weren't really seeing it. He had built this life from the ground up, not inherited, not gifted. Every dollar, every deal, every sleepless night. It had all been his. His name carried weight now. Investors trusted him. CEOs returned his calls. Entire neighborhoods shifted because of decisions he made over breakfast. People admired him. People respected him. People needed him, but no one knew him. His phone buzzed in his hand, the screen lighting up against the darkness. He glanced down. A name flashed across the screen. Lila. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, practiced. Her voice came through instantly, soft and sweet, wrapped in just enough warmth to sound real. "Baby, I miss you." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He had heard that tone before, many times. "I just saw the most beautiful wig today," she continued, a light laugh trailing behind her words. "It's perfect, like, perfect. Only $800. Ethan leaned back slightly against the railing, staring out again at the city. 800. For hair? Oh, don't say it like that, she replied quickly. You know I like to look good for you, for you. The words landed softly, but they didn't stay. Ethan didn't answer right away. His silence stretched just long enough for something uncomfortable to creep in between them. You're quiet, she said. I'm just thinking. Thinking about what? He looked down at the streets again. A man was pushing a cart along the sidewalk, bundled up against the cold. No one paid him any attention. People passed by without looking. Invisible, Ethan swallowed. Nothing, he said. Another pause. Then her tone shifted, just slightly, less soft, more expectant. So, are you going to send it? There it was. Ethan let out a quiet breath through his nose. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. I'll take care of it, he said. Thank you, she said quickly, the warmth returning as if it had never left. You're the best. He ended the call without saying goodbye. The silence rushed back in immediately, louder than before. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the blank screen of his phone. Then another notification popped up. A message from someone else. He didn't even recognize the number. Hey, I heard you help people. My brother needs support to study abroad. It would mean everything. Ethan stared at the message. Another one followed. My rent is due tomorrow. I don't know who else to ask. Then another. I haven't eaten all day. He locked the screen. The city lights flickered in his eyes again, but now they felt distant, artificial, like something projected onto glass. Ethan turned and walked slowly back inside. The apartment greeted him with silence. He passed the piano without looking at it, walked past the dining table set for 6, though he had never filled all the seats, past the hallway lined with framed magazine covers that featured his face, his name, his story. He stopped in the living room. The space was enormous, designed for gatherings, for laughter, for people. Tonight, it held only him. Ethan sank into the leather couch, his body heavy, as if the weight of everything he had built was finally settling on his shoulders. He rubbed his hands together slowly, staring at nothing. Memories flickered through his mind. A woman who had cried in his arms, telling him her family was struggling, only for him to later see her posting photos in designer jewelry he had unknowingly paid for. Another who had whispered that she loved him after 2 dinners, and asked him to fund a business she never started. And countless others. Different faces, same pattern. At first he had believed them. At first he had wanted to believe, because love to him had always meant giving, providing, protecting. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted. Giving had turned into being used, providing had turned into being expected, protecting had turned into being drained. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked down at his hands, strong hands, hands that had signed contracts worth millions, hands that had built an empire, and yet they felt empty. "If I had nothing," he murmured quietly to himself. The words hung in the air. He swallowed. If I had nothing, would anyone still love me? The question didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled deep inside him, heavy and unmovable. Outside, the city continued without him. Cars moved, people laughed, lives unfolded in 1,000 directions at once. Inside, time seemed to slow. Ethan leaned back again, his head resting against the couch. He closed his eyes. For a moment he imagined it. No penthouse, no tailored suits, no last name that opened doors. Just him. Would anyone still look at him the same way? Would anyone still stay? A faint sound pulled him back. The hum of the refrigerator in the distance. The ticking of a clock. The soft whisper of the air conditioning. Small, ordinary sounds. He opened his eyes again. The room looked exactly the same, but something inside him had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. Enough to make everything else feel uncertain. Ethan reached for his phone again, his thumb hovering over the screen. His contacts list filled with names, investors, partners, acquaintances, women. So many names, and yet, at that moment, not one of them felt like someone he could call, just to talk. He locked the phone again. Slowly, he stood up. He walked back toward the balcony, drawn by the city lights like something unfinished. The wind had picked up slightly, brushing against his shirt. Ethan stepped out again, gripping the railing a little tighter this time. His eyes moved across the skyline, but this time he wasn't just looking. He was thinking, really thinking, for the first time in a long time. What if he removed everything, the money, the name, the status? What would be left? And more importantly, who would stay? A car horn echoed from below. Somewhere, someone laughed. A siren cut through the night. Life, raw and unfiltered, continued down there, far from boardrooms and luxury dinners. Ethan exhaled slowly. He didn't have the answer. Not yet, but for the first time, he wanted to find out. And somewhere deep down inside, a quiet decision was beginning to take shape. One that would pull him out of this tower and into a world he had never truly seen. A world where no one cared who Ethan Cole was. A world where he would have to prove who he really was. He stared out at the city one last time, unaware that the answer he was searching for wasn't waiting in the skyline. It was waiting somewhere far below. With someone who had nothing, but still knew how to give everything. The words lingered in Ethan's mind long after the city lights dimmed behind his eyes. He didn't sleep much that night. The bed was soft, too soft. The silence pressed in around him like a question he couldn't escape. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Smiling faces. Asking faces. Faces that leaned in close, speaking softly, but always circling back to the same thing. Money. By 4:30 a.m., he gave up trying. Ethan sat up slowly, the sheets sliding off his shoulders. The skyline outside his bedroom window had begun to fade from black into that dull gray that came before sunrise. For a moment, he just sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Then he stood. No hesitation this time. He walked into his closet, an entire room lined with tailored suits, polished shoes, watches displayed behind glass like museum pieces. Everything had been chosen carefully over the years. Everything represented who he was, or at least who people believed he was. Ethan reached for a dark navy suit. He paused. His hand hovered in the air. Then slowly, he pulled it back. Instead, he moved toward the far end of the closet, where a few forgotten items hung. Old jeans, a plain gray hoodie, a jacket he hadn't worn in years. He ran his fingers over the fabric. It felt unfamiliar, simple, real. He pulled them down. By the time the sun began to rise, Ethan Cole no longer looked like a billionaire. He looked like someone people would pass on the street without noticing. 2 days later, his assistant, Marcus, stood in the empty penthouse, phone pressed tightly against his ear. "No, I don't know where he is," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. "He canceled all meetings. He shut down his accounts. He told me not to look for him." A pause. "Yes, I understand," but he was very clear. Marcus lowered the phone slowly, staring out at the same skyline Ethan had stood before just nights ago. Except now the man who owned it all was gone. The Bronx woke up loud, not gradually, not gently. It snapped awake. Car horns echoed down narrow streets. Storefront gates rattled open. Vendors shouted over one another, setting up carts along the sidewalks. The smell of coffee mixed with fried food and gasoline hung in the air like something permanent. Ethan sat behind the wheel of a dented gray sedan parked along the curb. The engine idled with a rough, uneven hum. He looked down at his hands resting on the steering wheel. No watch, no polished cuffs, just bare wrists and fingers that suddenly felt exposed. A small notification pinged on his phone. This one not from an investor or a partner. A ride request. Pickup, East 149th Street. Destination, Midtown. Ethan stared at the screen for a moment. This was it. No boardroom, no assistance, no safety net, just a button. He tapped accept. The GPS lit up, guiding him through streets he had never driven before. Buildings lined close together, paint chipped, windows barred. People moved fast, heads down, focused on their day. No one looked at him, not once. He pulled up to the curb. A man in a wrinkled jacket yanked open the passenger door without greeting. "Midtown," the man muttered, already scrolling on his phone. Ethan nodded. "Got it." They drove in silence for several minutes. Traffic crawled. A bus groaned beside them, releasing a burst of air that rattled the car slightly. Halfway through the ride, the man sighed loudly. "Can you go faster?" he snapped. Ethan glanced at the gridlocked street ahead. "I'll do what I can," the man scoffed. "That's what all you drivers say." Ethan didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the road. When they finally reached the destination, the man shoved the door open before the car fully stopped. He stepped out, then paused. Ethan waited. The man glanced back, pulled a crumpled bill from his pocket, and tossed it onto the seat. "Keep the change," he said flatly. Ethan looked down. It wasn't enough to cover the ride. By the time he looked back up, the man was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan sat there for a moment, the bill still resting on the passenger seat. He didn't chase him. He didn't say anything. He just stared. A car behind him honked loudly. "Move!" Ethan blinked, snapping back. He put the car in gear and pulled away. By noon, his shirt clung to his back with sweat. The city didn't slow down. If anything, it grew louder, more impatient. Another ride, another passenger. A woman climbed in, her heels clicking sharply against the car floor. "Air conditioning," she said immediately, not looking at him. "It's on," Ethan replied. "Well, turn it up." He did. She sighed dramatically, checking her reflection in her phone camera. "Some of you drivers really shouldn't be doing this job," she muttered. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the wheel, but he said nothing. When they reached her stop, she stepped out without a word. No tip, no thank you, just gone. Hours passed, faces blurred together, voices overlapped, commands, complaints, silence. At a red light, Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror. For a brief second, he barely recognized himself. Same face, same eyes. But something had changed. Or maybe something had been revealed. A group of young women stood on the corner as he pulled up for his next ride. They laughed loudly, their voices cutting through the street noise. One of them leaned down to the open window, looking him over. "He's kind of cute," she said, grinning. Another rolled her eyes. "Yeah, but look at the car." Laughter. "Cute doesn't pay bills," a third added. They climbed in, still laughing. Ethan stared straight ahead, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. "Where to?" he asked. "Does it matter?" one of them joked. "Just drive." They continued talking behind him, their voices careless, unfiltered. "I would never date a guy like this. Imagine struggling like that. God forbid." More laughter. Ethan's hands tightened around the wheel. He focused on the road, on the red light turning green, on the car moving forward. But their words lingered, sharp, unavoidable. When he dropped them off, they stepped out without looking back. One of them tossed a few bills onto the seat. Again, not enough. The door slammed. Silence returned. Ethan didn't move. Cars passed him. Horns blared. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. But inside the car, everything felt still. "So this is it," he whispered under his breath. "This is how people see you, when you have nothing." He looked down at his hands again. Dust clung faintly to his skin, his sleeves were wrinkled. His car smelled faintly of stale air and something metallic. And for the first time in his life, no one cared who he was, no one admired him, no one respected him. They didn't hate him, they didn't love him, they simply didn't see him. Ethan leaned back slightly in his seat, his head resting against the worn leather. The city moved around him like he wasn't there, invisible. A long breath left his chest. He could end it right now, drive back, take a hot shower, put on a suit, call Marcus. Everything would go back to normal, respect would return. So would the smiles, but he knew now what those smiles really meant. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not done." He sat up, straightening his posture slightly. Another ride request came through. Pickup, a small diner on the corner of 138th Street. Ethan stared at the screen. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he tapped accept. He pulled away from the curb, merging back into the flow of traffic. The sun had begun to dip lower, casting long shadows across the streets. Neon signs flickered to life. The city was shifting again, day turning into night. And somewhere ahead, without him knowing it yet, a single moment was waiting. A moment that wouldn't ask him for money, wouldn't judge his car, wouldn't laugh at his situation. A moment that would look at him and actually see him. Ethan turned onto 138th Street, the late afternoon light slipping between buildings in long golden strips. The diner sat on the corner like it had been there forever. Faded red sign, flickering neon letters, a window smeared slightly from years of hands and weather. Open 24 hours, he pulled up to the curb and put the car in park. For a second, he just sat there. Inside, he could see people moving. Slow, familiar motions. A man at the counter hunched over coffee. A waitress carrying plates with practiced ease. The glow of warm yellow lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Different from everything he knew. Different from polished glass towers and silent penthouses. This place felt alive. His phone buzzed again. Pickup confirmed. Name, Maya. Ethan glanced toward the diner door. It opened, and she stepped out. She moved quickly at first, pushing the door back with her shoulder while balancing a small paper bag in one hand. The cool air brushed against her face, lifting a few loose curls from her hair. She paused just outside, scanning the street. Then her eyes found his car. For a brief moment, she hesitated. Not in judgment, not in annoyance, just noticing. Ethan felt it immediately. That pause, not like the others. She walked over, her steps steady, unhurried. Her jacket was simple, worn at the edges. Sneakers slightly faded. Nothing expensive, nothing meant to impress, and yet, there was something about her presence. Grounded, real. She opened the passenger door and slid into the seat, setting the paper bag gently on her lap. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was soft but clear, not rushed, not distracted. Ethan blinked once, caught off guard by something so simple. "Evening," he replied. He glanced at the app. "Maya, that's me. Where to?" "East 142nd, near the bus terminal." Ethan nodded and pulled away from the curb. The city moved around them again, but this time, something felt different. Quiet settled into the car, but it wasn't the same heavy silence he'd grown used to throughout the day. It wasn't filled with impatience or expectation. It was just quiet. Maya adjusted the paper bag slightly, careful not to spill whatever was inside. The faint smell of warm food filled the car, something simple, comforting. Ethan noticed his stomach tighten. He hadn't eaten since morning. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. After a few minutes, Maya spoke again. "Long day." Ethan glanced at her briefly in the mirror. "Something like that." She nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. "Yeah," she said. "Those usually are. No follow-up question. No curiosity about his income, his life, his potential. Just acknowledgement." Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not pressure, not performance, just ease. They stopped at a red light. A man stood on the corner holding a cardboard sign, his coat thin against the cold air. Cars passed without slowing. Maya looked out the window, her gaze lingering on him for a moment. Then she reached into the paper bag. Ethan watched in the rearview mirror as she pulled out a wrapped sandwich and a small bottle of water. Without hesitation, she rolled down her window. "Sir," she called gently. The man turned, surprised. She leaned out slightly and handed him the food. "Here, please take this." The man blinked, then nodded quickly. "Thank you. God bless you." Maya gave a small smile and rolled the window back up. She didn't say anything after that, didn't explain, didn't look for approval. She just sat back in her seat, hands resting quietly in her lap. Ethan stared at the traffic light. Red, still red. Something shifted inside him again. "You didn't have to do that," he said after a moment. Maya shrugged lightly. "I know." The light turned green. Ethan pressed the gas. They drove on. A few blocks later, the streets grew narrower, the buildings older. The glow of storefronts gave way to dimmer lights, quieter corners. "Right up here," Maya said. Ethan slowed, pulling over near a bus terminal where a few people stood waiting, bundled against the cooling evening. He put the car in park. Maya reached for her bag again, checking inside. Then she looked up. "Thank you," she said. Simple, direct. She pulled out a few bills and handed them to him. Ethan glanced down. Exact fare. Plus a little extra, not thrown, not tossed, placed into his hand. "Drive safe," she added. Ethan looked at her. Really looked this time. Her eyes met his without hesitation. No judgment, no pity, just recognition. "Your work matters," she said. The words landed differently than anything he had heard all day, not because they were dramatic, but because they felt real. Ethan didn't answer right away. He couldn't. Something caught in his throat. He nodded instead. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You too." Maya gave a small, almost tired smile, then opened the door. Cold air rushed in for a moment before she stepped out, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. She walked away without looking back. No lingering glance, no expectation, just gone. Ethan sat there, the engine still running, the city still moving. But everything felt still. He looked down at the money in his hand, then at the empty passenger seat, then out the window, where Maya disappeared into the flow of people near the terminal. For the first time that day, no one had rushed him, no one had insulted him, no one had treated him like he was less. She hadn't asked for anything, hadn't hinted at anything, hadn't even tried to keep the conversation going, and yet, she had given something he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Respect. Ethan leaned back slowly in his seat, letting out a long breath. He glanced at the rearview mirror again, same face, same man, but something in his eyes had changed, softer, more awake. Another ride request pinged on his phone. He didn't accept it right away. Instead, his gaze drifted back to the street where she had walked away. Maya. He repeated the name silently in his mind. It felt different, not like the others, not like the names that filled his contacts list. This one stayed. Ethan finally tapped accept, but as he pulled back into traffic, one thought stayed with him. Not loud, not overwhelming, just steady. Maybe the answer he had been searching for wasn't in grand gestures, wasn't in luxury dinners or perfect appearances. Maybe it was something quieter, something that didn't ask for anything in return. He drove through the city, the neon lights beginning to glow stronger as night settled in. And somewhere not far away, Maya walked down a dim street, her figure blending into the rhythm of everyday life, unaware that she had just stepped into someone else's story, a story that was about to change both of their lives in ways neither of them could yet understand. The night carried on, but Ethan didn't forget her. Not the way she spoke, not the way she looked at him, not the way she handed him the money, like he was worth something. The next morning, the Bronx woke the same way it always did. Loud, restless, unapologetic. A delivery truck rattled past his car as Ethan sat parked near a curb, sipping coffee from a paper cup that had already gone lukewarm. He hadn't planned to come back. At least, that's what he told himself, but his GPS history said otherwise. 8th Street, the diner. He tapped the steering wheel lightly, debating. It didn't make sense. He had already learned what he came for, hadn't he? People treated you well when you had money, and poorly when you didn't. That was the truth. Simple, clear, finished. So why was he here again? Ethan let out a quiet breath, then pushed the door open and stepped out. The air was colder this morning. A sharp breeze moved through the street, carrying the scent of coffee and something fried. The neon sign of the diner flickered faintly even in daylight. He hesitated at the door, then pushed it open. A bell rang softly overhead. Inside, the diner was warm, almost too warm compared to outside. The smell of bacon, eggs, and fresh coffee wrapped around him instantly. Plates clinked. A radio played something low and steady in the background. People filled the booths, construction workers, a couple of elderly men arguing quietly over a newspaper, a mother feeding her child at the corner table. Normal life, unpolished, real. Ethan stepped inside, unsure of where to go for a moment. "Sit anywhere you like," a voice called out. He turned. Maya stood behind the counter, tying her apron, her hair pulled back loosely. The same calm presence, the same grounded energy. She noticed him, but didn't react the way others would have. No recognition, no surprise, no curiosity, just a nod. Like he was any other person walking through the door. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest again. He slid into a booth near the window. Maya grabbed a small notepad and walked over. "Morning," she said. "Morning. What can I get you?" Ethan glanced at the menu, though he wasn't really reading it. "Coffee," he said. "And whatever's simple." She gave the small smile. "Simple is what we do best." She turned and walked back toward the counter. Ethan watched her for a moment before looking out the window. People passed by. Cars rolled through the street. Life kept moving, but inside, things felt slower, quieter. Maya returned with a mug of coffee, placing it gently in front of him. "Food'll be out in a few minutes." "Thanks." She nodded and moved on to another table. Ethan wrapped his hands around the mug, warm, steady, different from the cold steel railing of his penthouse, different from the polished glass offices. He took a sip. It wasn't perfect coffee, but it was good, honest. A man near the counter dropped his wallet accidentally. It hit the floor with a soft thud. Before anyone else could react, Maya stepped over, picked it up, and handed it back. "You dropped this." The man checked inside quickly, then nodded. "Everything's there. Appreciate it." Maya just smiled and went back to work. No praise, no attention, just doing the right thing. Ethan watched. Something about it didn't add up. In his world, everything came with a cost, a reason, a strategy. Nothing was just given. His food arrived. Eggs, toast, and something that smelled like home. Though he couldn't quite place it. He hadn't eaten anything like this in years. He picked up the fork and took a bite. Simple, warm, filling. He didn't realize how much he needed it. Across the room, Maya moved from table to table, checking on customers, refilling cups, laughing softly at something one of the older men said. No rush, no pressure, just presence. A young boy near the entrance tripped, dropping his drink. It spilled across the floor, the cup rolling away. The boy froze, eyes wide. His mother sighed, already reaching for napkins. "It's okay," Maya said, stepping in quickly. "Accidents happen." She grabbed a towel, kneeling down to clean it up. "It's my fault," the boy whispered. Maya looked at him and shook her head gently. "No, it's just life being messy sometimes." The boy smiled a little. Ethan watched the exchange. No one else seemed to think it was anything special. But to him, it was everything. Because it wasn't forced. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for money. It was just kindness, and it didn't ask for anything back. Ethan finished his meal slowly. When Maya came back with the check, he looked up at her. "You always like this?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow slightly. "Like what?" "Just helping people." She shrugged lightly. "People need help sometimes, and you don't expect anything in return?" She looked at him for a moment. Really looked this time. Then she smiled. "If you expect something, it's not really help, is it?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He nodded slowly. "Guess not." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the small amount of cash he had set aside for this version of himself. He placed it on the table, more than enough. Maya glanced at it, then back at him. "You gave too much. It's fine." She shook her head and slid a few bills back toward him. No, you work for your money. Keep it. Ethan stared at her. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever refused his money, not like this, not without a hidden motive. Just take it, he said quietly. Maya met his gaze. I said keep it. There was no anger in her voice, no pride, just certainty. Ethan slowly picked up the extra cash. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya gave a small nod and moved on. Just like that. No lingering, no expectation. Ethan sat there a little longer, staring at the table. Something inside him felt unsettled, but not in a bad way. More like something was shifting, something he didn't fully understand yet. He stood up and walked toward the door. The bell rang again as he stepped outside. The cold air hit him instantly. Cars rushed past. People moved quickly. The city hadn't changed. But he had, even if just a little. Ethan walked back to his car, pausing before opening the door. He glanced back at the diner, at the warm light glowing through the windows, at the people inside, living their lives without pretending. Then he looked down at his hands again, still rough, still empty, but somehow they didn't feel as empty as before. He got into the car and started the engine. Another ride request came through. He accepted it without thinking, but as he pulled away from the curb, one thought stayed with him. Clear, steady, unavoidable. Maybe the question wasn't just, who would love me if I had nothing? Maybe it was, who am I when I have nothing? And for the first time, he wasn't sure he liked the answer. But he knew one thing. He wasn't done learning, and somehow, that woman in the diner, the one who gave without asking, was going to be part of that answer. Ethan told himself it was just curiosity. That's why he kept coming back. That's what he repeated in his mind the next morning as he parked across from the diner again, engine idling, fingers tapping lightly against the steering wheel. Just curiosity, nothing more. The sky was overcast today, a thin gray layer stretching across the city. The light felt softer, muted, like the world had turned the brightness down just a little. Ethan glanced at the diner window, same place, same sign, same quiet warmth inside. He turned off the engine, stepped out. This time he didn't hesitate at the door. The bell rang again as he entered, the sound now strangely familiar. Back again? A voice called from the counter. Ethan looked up. Maya. There was a hint of amusement in her eyes. Not mocking, just noticing. Guess so, he said. She nodded toward the same booth near the window. Your seat's still there? Ethan felt something small but unexpected at those words. Your seat. He sat down, the same warmth wrapped around him, the same smells, the same rhythm of everyday life. Maya walked over, notepad in hand. Coffee? Yeah. Same food? Ethan paused. He hadn't even realized he had a same. Yeah, he said slowly. Same. She gave a small nod and walked off. Ethan leaned back slightly, letting his gaze drift across the room. A man at the counter laughed at something the cook said. A woman stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, staring out the window. The radio played an old song, something soft and steady. Nothing here was impressive. Nothing here was meant to be, and yet, it felt more real than anything he had left behind. Maya returned with his coffee. Busy today? He asked. She shrugged lightly. Always. You work here every day, most days. Mornings here, evenings somewhere else. Ethan frowned slightly. Somewhere else. She hesitated just a moment, then said, Community kitchen, a few blocks down. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You volunteer? Sometimes, she said. Sometimes I just show up. He studied her for a second. You don't get paid? She smiled faintly. Not everything has to be paid. Ethan didn't respond. He just nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand a language he hadn't spoken in years. His food arrived, and for a while they didn't talk, but the silence wasn't heavy. It felt easy. When he finished, Maya cleared his plate. "You working today?" she asked. "Yeah," she nodded. "Stay safe out there." Simple words, but they stayed with him longer than they should have. The afternoon dragged. Traffic crawled. Passengers came and went, some quiet, some rude. Some didn't look at him at all. But something had shifted inside Ethan. The words still stung, the dismissive tones still cut. But they didn't land the same way, not after that diner, not after her. As the sun dipped lower, casting orange light across the buildings, Ethan found himself driving without really thinking, until he realized where he was, the community kitchen. A small building tucked between two older structures. Its paint chipped, but its door open. People moved in and out, some carrying bags, some with nothing at all. Ethan slowed, parked across the street. He sat there for a moment, watching. Then he saw her. Maya stood just inside the doorway, handing out containers of food. Her movements were quick, practiced, but never rushed. She looked each person in the eye, said something to each of them, not just handing food, seeing them. Ethan stepped out of the car, crossed the street slowly. He didn't know why, he didn't plan to go in, but his feet kept moving. The closer he got, the more he noticed the details. A man sitting on the steps, holding his container like it was something fragile, a woman thanking Maya with both hands, a child smiling as she handed him an extra piece of bread. Ethan stopped just outside the door. Maya looked up. For a second, surprise flickered across her face. Then it softened. "You got lost?" she asked lightly. Ethan shook his head. "No, He glanced around. "I didn't know you did this." She shrugged. "It's just food." "It's more than that," he said quietly. Maya studied him for a moment, then stepped aside slightly. "You hungry?" Ethan almost said no, out of habit, out of pride. But something stopped him. "Yeah," he admitted. She handed him a container, warm, simple. No questions asked. "Sit if you want," she said, nodding toward a bench inside. Ethan walked in, sat down. Around him, people ate quietly. Some talked softly. Some just sat in silence, holding on to the moment. Ethan opened the container. Steam rose up. He took a bite. Same feeling as the diner. Warm, filling, real. Across the room, Maya continued working, helping, moving, giving. Not once did she look like she expected anything in return. Ethan watched her. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar settle deep inside his chest. Not doubt, not emptiness, something else, something quieter, something steady. Respect, not for himself, but for her. He finished eating and stood up, walking back toward her. "You do this every day?" he asked. "Most days." "Why?" Maya paused, looked at him, then said simply, "Because someone has to." Ethan opened his mouth, closed it again. He didn't have a better answer. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a few bills. "Let me help," he said. Maya's eyes dropped to the money, then back to him. Nowhere. Ethan frowned slightly. "Why not?" "Because you don't understand yet." The words weren't harsh, but they landed hard. Ethan stood, the money still in his hand. "What don't I understand?" Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "This isn't about feeling good for 5 minutes," she said. "It's about showing up when it's not easy." Ethan swallowed. She nodded toward the door. "If you want to help, come back tomorrow." Then she turned and walked away, handing another container to someone waiting. Just like that. Ethan stood there, money still in his hand. For once, it didn't feel like it meant anything. He slowly lowered it, slipped it back into his pocket, and walked out. The air outside felt colder now. Night had settled in. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the pavement. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the building, at the door still open, at the people still coming and going. He had spent his entire life believing that money was the answer, that it solved problems, that it created value. But inside that small room, he had seen something else, something money couldn't buy, something that had to be lived. Ethan walked back to his car slowly, got in, started the engine, but he didn't drive right away. He sat there, hands on the wheel, thinking. "Tomorrow," she said, "come back tomorrow, not with money, not with answers, just come back." Ethan looked out at the street one more time, and for the first time since he left his old life behind, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something new, something uncomfortable, something real, and something that was about to test him in ways he hadn't even imagined yet. The next day came colder. A thin layer of frost clung to the edges of parked cars, and the morning air cut sharper than usual. Ethan sat in his car outside the community kitchen, engine off this time, hands resting quietly in his lap. He had come back, not with money, not with a plan, just back. For a moment, he didn't move. The building looked the same as the night before. Paint worn, door slightly crooked, but already a small line had begun to form outside. People wrapped in coats, shifting their weight from one foot to the other, waiting for something simple. Food, warmth, little dignity. Ethan stepped out of the car. The cold hit him immediately, slipping through his jacket, settling into his bones. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked toward the entrance. No one paid him any attention. Just another man in line, just another face. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet movement. Volunteers set up tables, stacking containers, pouring coffee into large thermoses. The smell of soup filled the air, thick and comforting. And there she was. Maya stood near the back, tying her apron again, her sleeves already rolled up. She glanced up as the door opened. Their eyes met. No surprise this time, just recognition. "You came back," she said. Ethan nodded once. "I said I would." She studied him for a moment, as if measuring something she couldn't quite see. Then she gestured toward the stack of containers. "Grab those, start passing them out. No instructions, no introduction, just do the work." Ethan hesitated for half a second, then stepped forward. The containers were warm in his hands, heavier than they looked. He carried them to the front table where people began stepping up one by one. "Here," he said, handing the first one to an older man. The man took it without looking at him. No thank you, no eye contact, just moved on. Ethan swallowed. Next person, a woman with tired eyes and shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "You're welcome." Her fingers brushed his briefly as she took the container. Cold, fragile. He felt it long after she stepped away. The line moved slowly, face after face, story after story, written in quiet ways. Worn coats, tired expressions, hands that had worked too hard for too little. At first, Ethan tried to speak to each of them. "Here you go. Careful. It's hot. Have a good day." Some responded, most didn't, not out of rudeness, just exhaustion. After a while, he stopped expecting anything back. And something strange happened. It didn't bother him. Maya moved beside him at one point, refilling containers. Her movements steady and efficient. "You're too careful," she said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "You're thinking too much." He frowned slightly. "I'm just trying to do it right." She shook her head. "There's no right. Just do it." Then she moved away again. Ethan stood there for a moment, her words settling in. Then he turned back to the line. This time he didn't think. He just handed out the food, one after another. No expectation, no analysis, just giving. Time passed without him noticing. The room filled and emptied again. The line outside grew shorter. The containers stacked on the table slowly disappeared. At some point, his hands stopped feeling cold. At some point, the noise faded into something softer. At some point, he forgot about himself. A child stepped forward, barely tall enough to reach the table. His jacket hung too big on his small frame. Ethan crouched slightly, bringing himself down to eye level. "Hey," he said gently. The boy looked up, unsure. "What's your name?" "Jordan." "Well, Jordan, this one's extra warm. Just for you." The boy smiled, small but real. "Thank you." Ethan handed him the container, watched as he carried it carefully back to his mother. Something shifted again, deeper this time. Not just understanding, not just observation. Feeling. Maya watched from across the room. She didn't say anything. But she saw it. The moment he stopped performing, the moment he stopped trying to prove something, the moment he just became present. Hours later, the last container was handed out. The room quieted. Volunteers began cleaning up, stacking empty trays, wiping down tables. Ethan leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. His back ached slightly. His arms felt heavy, but it wasn't the same exhaustion he knew from long meetings or late nights. This felt different, earned. Maya walked over, handing him a cup of coffee. "You survived," she said. Ethan let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "Barely." She leaned against the counter beside him. "You didn't quit. I thought about it," he admitted. She nodded. Most people do. Ethan took a sip of the coffee. It was hot, stronger than the diner's. He looked around the room. "It's not easy," he said. "No," Maya replied. "It's not. Why do you keep doing it?" Maya didn't answer right away. She looked toward the door, now closed, the line gone. "Because I know what it feels like," she said quietly. Ethan turned toward her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then said, "There was a time. We stood on the other side of that line." Ethan's chest tightened slightly. "You?" She nodded. "Me, my mom, my brother." She looked down at her hands for a moment. "No one saw us back then," she added softly. "Not really." Ethan didn't speak. He didn't know what to say. Maya looked back up. "So now, I try to see people, simple words, but they carried weight." Ethan nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand." Maya studied him again, then said, "You're starting. Not finished, not there yet, just starting." Ethan finished his coffee and set the cup down. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said. Maya didn't smile, didn't praise him. She just nodded. "We'll be here." Ethan turned toward the door. His body felt tired, but his mind clearer. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit him again, sharper now after the warmth inside. He pulled his jacket tighter, walked toward his car, but something felt off, different, not inside him, around him. He slowed, looked up. A man leaned against his car, well-dressed, out of place, watching him. Ethan's stomach tightened. The man straightened, stepping forward. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly. Ethan froze. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The street, the noise, the cold. Everything faded. Because in that single moment, the life he had left behind had just found him again. Ethan didn't move. The cold air pressed against his skin, but he barely felt it. His eyes stayed locked on the man standing beside his car. Clean coat, polished shoes, posture too straight for this part of the city. Out of place. Wrong. Mr. Cole, the man repeated, lowering his voice. We've been looking for you. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He glanced around instinctively. People moved past them, unaware. A woman hurried by with grocery bags. A bus roared down the street. The world didn't stop. But inside him, something had shifted. Not here, Ethan said quietly. The man nodded. Of course. They stepped a little further down the sidewalk, away from the kitchen entrance. Ethan kept his voice low. How did you find me? The man adjusted his sleeve slightly, like this was just another business meeting. You shut everything down, he said. Accounts, schedules, communications. But you forgot something. Ethan's eyes narrowed. The company still exists, the man continued. And when a CEO disappears, people start asking questions. Ethan exhaled slowly. Of course, you shouldn't be here, he said. With respect, sir, neither should you. That landed harder than Ethan expected. He looked back towards the community kitchen. The door was still open. Warm light spilled out onto the sidewalk. Inside, people were cleaning up, moving on with their evening. Maya, if she stepped outside right now. Listen to me, Ethan said firmly. You don't know me here. You didn't see me. You leave, and you don't come back. The man hesitated. That's not how this works, sir. Ethan stepped closer. It is now. Something in his tone shifted. Quiet, but unmistakable. Authority, the kind that wasn't worn on a suit, but built over years. The man noticed it. Of course he did. Your board is meeting in 48 hours, he said carefully. They're already discussing contingency plans. Ethan didn't react. Your absence is costing millions, the man added. Investors are nervous. Deals are on hold. Ethan let out a breath. That's not your problem. With respect, sir, it is my job. Ethan looked at him for a long moment, then said, Then do your job. The man frowned slightly. Keep everything steady, Ethan continued. Tell them I'm handling something personally. And when they ask what that something is, Ethan's gaze hardened. Tell them it's the first real decision I've made in years. The man didn't respond right away. He studied Ethan carefully, not the suit, not the title. The man standing in front of him now, different. Something had changed. Finally, he nodded. I'll hold them off as long as I can. That's all I need. A pause. Then the man added quietly, This, whatever this is, it won't stay hidden forever. Ethan followed his gaze. Back to the kitchen, back to the light. I know, Ethan said. The man stepped back. Take care, Mr. Cole. Ethan didn't answer. He just watched as the man walked away, disappearing into the same crowd that had ignored him all day, invisible, just like him. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, breathing, thinking. Then he turned and froze. Maya stood in the doorway. She hadn't heard everything, but she had heard enough. Her eyes moved between Ethan and the direction the man had gone. Mr. Cole? She repeated slowly. The name sounded different coming from her. He felt it, every part of it. Ethan swallowed. It's not, don't, she said quietly. Not loud, not angry, just firm. Ethan stopped. Maya stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. The warmth of the kitchen disappeared, replaced by the cold evening air. You said your name was Ethan, she said. It is. She crossed her arms slightly. And the rest? Ethan hesitated. He could lie. He had lied before. It would be easy. But something in her eyes made that impossible. I didn't tell you everything, he admitted. Maya let out a small breath. That's one way to say it. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I didn't plan for you to find out like this. Find out what? She asked. There it was, the question, simple, direct, unavoidable. Ethan looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had fed him when he was hungry, who had given without asking, who had seen him when no one else had. And now, he was about to show her the one thing that could change everything. "I'm not just a driver," he said quietly. Maya's expression didn't change. I figured that much. Ethan let out a breath. "I own a company," she waited. He swallowed. "Several." Still, she said nothing. "And I didn't lose my job," he continued. "Or my money. I chose this." A long pause settled between them. The sounds of the city filled the space. Distant traffic, footsteps, a door slamming somewhere down the block. Maya's voice, when it came, was softer. "You chose this?" Ethan nodded. "I needed to know something." "What?" He hesitated, then said, "Who would still treat me the same if I had nothing?" The words hung in the air, heavy. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Not confused, not surprised, just still. "And what did you find?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated, painful, but also clear. "I found out most people don't," he said. Maya nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "That sounds about right." Another pause. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "But you did." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "I didn't know who you were," she said. "I know. If I had known," she began, then stopped. Ethan's chest tightened. "What?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It did matter." He could feel it. Everything suddenly felt fragile, unsteady. "I didn't lie to hurt you," he said. Maya let out a small laugh. Not amused, just tired. "You didn't lie to protect me either." That hit harder than anything else. Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. Maya looked away for a moment, then back at him. "So what is this?" she asked. "A test?" Ethan shook his head. "No." "But you were testing people," she said. "I was trying to understand something." "And I was just part of that?" she asked. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it again, because there was no answer that didn't sound wrong. Maya nodded slowly, like she already knew. "I see." She stepped back slightly. The distance between them grew, not much, but enough. "I should go," she said. Ethan's heart dropped. "Wait," she stopped, but didn't turn back. "I didn't expect to meet you," he said. "That doesn't change what you did. I know." Silence again, thick this time, heavy. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Ethan added quietly. Maya turned then, looked at him, her eyes softer now, but still guarded. "Good," she said, "because I don't know if I can." Ethan felt that. Deep. "But I'm not leaving," he said. Maya frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I'm staying," he replied. "Here. With this." He gestured toward the kitchen. Maya studied him carefully, trying to see if it was real, trying to see if he meant it. "You don't belong here," she said. Ethan shook his head. "Maybe not. A beat. But I want to learn how to." Maya didn't answer. She just looked at him, long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Then she turned, walked back toward the door. Before going inside, she paused. Without looking back, she said quietly, "Tomorrow, same time." Then she stepped in. The door closed. The warmth disappeared again. Ethan stood alone on the sidewalk, cold, exposed, and for the first time since the truth came out, he wasn't sure what would happen next. But he knew one thing: this wasn't over, not even close, because now, it wasn't just about what he was trying to learn. It was about what he might lose, if he didn't prove that he deserved to stay. The next day felt heavier, because of the cold, though the wind cut sharper than before, slipping through coats and under collars. Not because of the noise, though the Bronx never seemed to quiet down. It was heavier because something had changed. The truth had been spoken, and once truth enters a place, it doesn't leave quietly. Ethan stood outside this community kitchen again, his hands tucked deep into his pockets. The door was already open. People were already lining up. But this time, he didn't walk in right away. Yesterday, he had stepped inside without thinking. Today, he felt like he had to earn it. He watched through the doorway. Maya moved inside, just like before, setting up, organizing, speaking softly to the volunteers. Nothing about her had changed, but something in the space between them had, invisible, but real. Ethan took a breath, then stepped forward. The moment he crossed the doorway, a few heads turned. Not many, but enough. One of the volunteers, a tall man in his 40s, looked at him briefly, then at Maya. Maya didn't react, didn't introduce him, didn't explain anything. She just kept working. Ethan stood there for a second, unsure. Then he moved towards the back, grabbing a stack of containers without being told. Work. That's why he was here, not to explain, not to fix things with words, just work. He carried the containers to the table, setting them down carefully. The line began moving again. People stepped forward. He handed out food, same motions, same rhythm. But something felt different. Before, he had been invisible. Now, he felt seen, not in a good way, more like watched. A man stepped up, taking a container from his hand. "You knew?" the man asked. Ethan nodded slightly. Something like that. The man looked him up and down, then said, "Stick around long enough, you'll understand." Ethan didn't ask what he meant. He just handed out the next container. Across the room, Maya worked without looking at him. Or maybe, without letting him see that she was. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. Ethan kept moving, lifting, passing, cleaning. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't try to stand out, didn't try to explain who he was for the first time in his life. He let himself be just another person in the room. And yet, he could feel the distance. Every time he glanced toward Maya, she was focused somewhere else. Every time their paths crossed, she moved past him like he was just another volunteer, professional, calm, careful. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either, and that hurt more than he expected. Late afternoon, the crowd thinned. The last few people took their meals and stepped back out into the cold. The room quieted again. Volunteers began cleaning up. Ethan grabbed a broom, sweeping near the entrance. The tall man from earlier leaned against the wall, watching him for a moment. "You don't talk much," he said. Ethan kept sweeping. "Just working." The man nodded slowly. "That's good. Talking doesn't feed people." Ethan glanced at him. The man smiled slightly. "Name's Raymond." Ethan. Raymond's expression didn't change. No reaction, no recognition, just a nod. "Keep showing up, Ethan," he said. "That's what matters." Ethan held that for a second, then nodded back. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I will." Across him, Maya wiped down a table, her movements slower now, tired, but steady. Ethan finished sweeping and leaned the broom against the wall. He hesitated, then walked toward her. She paused, looked up. "What?" Her tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Maya held his gaze. "That's your choice, I know." A pause. "I meant what I said," he added. "I want to learn this, not just watch it." Maya studied him, longer this time, trying to read something deeper. "You can't learn this in a day," she said. "I'm not trying to." "Then what are you trying to do?" Ethan hesitated, because the answer had changed. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It wasn't just about proving something to himself. It matters, he said finally. What you do here. It matters. Maya's eyes softened for a brief second, then returned to neutral. Yeah, she said quietly. It does. Another pause. Then she added, but that doesn't mean you understand it yet. Ethan nodded. I know, and it doesn't erase what happened yesterday. That one landed hard. Ethan didn't look away. I'm not asking it to. Maya held his gaze a moment longer, then looked back down, continuing to wipe the table. The conversation was over, or at least paused. Ethan stood there for a second, then stepped back. He didn't push, didn't try to fix it. He turned and grabbed a stack of empty trays instead. Work, that's what mattered now. Outside, the sky darkened early. Clouds rolled in, heavy and low. By the time the last of the cleanup was done, rain had started falling. Slow at first, then steady. Ethan stepped outside, pulling his jacket tighter. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, turning everything into streaks of gold and shadow. He walked toward his car, then stopped. Maya stood under the small awning near the door, watching the rain. She didn't have an umbrella. Neither did he. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence. You driving tonight? She asked without looking at him. Yeah, she nodded slightly. Be careful. Roads get bad in this weather. Ethan stepped closer, just enough to stand under the edge of the awning. You need a ride? He asked. Maya hesitated, then shook her head. I'm fine. The rain picked up, hitting the pavement harder now. Ethan glanced at the street, then back at her. It's not out of pity, he said quietly. It's just a ride. Maya looked at him, searching. Then finally, she nodded. All right. Ethan walked to the car, unlocking it. She followed, stepping in carefully, brushing rain from her jacket. The car door shut. For a moment, the world outside faded again. Just the two of them, silence, different from before. He started the engine. Same place? He asked. Yeah. They pulled into the rain-soaked streets. Water streaked across the windshield, wipers moving back and forth in a steady rhythm. Neither of them spoke for a while. The city looked different in the rain, blurred, softer, less sharp. Ethan glanced at her briefly. She stared out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. You don't trust me, he said. It wasn't a question. Maya didn't turn. No, she said. Simple, honest. Ethan nodded. I get that. A beat. But I'm not the same person you think I am, he added. Maya let out a quiet breath. That's the problem, Ethan. She turned then, looked at him directly. I don't know who you are. The words settled between them, heavy, real. Ethan didn't answer, because for the first time, he wasn't sure either. The car rolled through the wet streets, headlights reflecting off puddles, the sound of rain filling the quiet. And somewhere in that silence, both of them realized something. It wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about trust, and trust was going to be a lot harder to earn. The rain didn't stop. It followed them through the streets, tapping steadily against the windshield, blurring the city into streaks of light and shadow. Ethan drove slower than usual, careful on the slick roads, his hands steady on the wheel. Maya sat beside him, quiet, not tense, not relaxed, just distant, the kind of distance that didn't come from silence but from something deeper, something unresolved. They turned onto her street, the buildings older, closer together. A flickering street lamp cast uneven light across the wet pavement. Water pooled along the curb. Ethan pulled the car to a stop. For a moment, neither of them moved. The engine hummed softly. Rain filled the spaces between words that weren't spoken. Maya reached for the door handle. Thank you, she said, polite, Nothing more, Ethan nodded. You're welcome. She opened the door. Cold air rushed in, along with the sound of rain hitting concrete. Then she paused, not turning back, just pausing. You don't have to keep doing this, she said quietly. Ethan frowned slightly. Doing what? This, she said, gesturing lightly, trying to prove something. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I'm not trying to prove anything. Maya let out a small breath. That's what it looks like. She stepped out, closed the door gently behind her, and walked away. Ethan sat there, watching. The rain soaked through her jacket as she moved down the sidewalk, her figure slowly disappearing into the dim light. He didn't call after her, didn't follow. He just watched until she was gone. The next few days felt longer than they should have. Ethan kept showing up, every morning, every evening, the diner, the kitchen, work. He didn't miss a day, but something had changed, not in the place, not in the people, in her. Maya still spoke to him, still worked beside him, still gave instructions when needed. But the warmth was gone, replaced by something careful, measured, like she was holding a line she didn't want crossed again. Ethan felt it in every small moment, the way she didn't meet his eyes as often, the way conversations ended quicker, the way silence lingered longer. And no matter how much he showed up, that distance stayed. One afternoon, Ethan was stacking chairs after a long shift at the kitchen when he overheard two volunteers talking near the back door. You see him? One of them said quietly. Yeah, something's off about him. He don't look like he belongs here. Ethan froze for a second. Not because it was new, but because it wasn't wrong. He didn't belong. Not yet, maybe not ever. He kept working, didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, because this time, he understood. That evening, he arrived at the diner a little earlier than usual. The sky was clear again, the rain gone, leaving behind a chill that settled deep into the streets. Inside, the diner buzzed with its usual rhythm. Maya moved between tables, carrying plates, checking on customers. Ethan sat in his usual booth, your seat. The words came back to him, but they didn't feel the same now, not anymore. Maya approached, notepad in hand. Coffee? Yeah, she wrote it down. Food? The usual. She nodded, turned away. No smile, no pause. Ethan watched her walk off. Something in his chest tightened. Not frustration, not anger, something else. Loss. Even though he hadn't really had it to begin with, his coffee arrived. He stared at it for a while before taking a sip. It tasted the same, but it didn't feel the same. Across the room, a loud voice broke through the calm. Hey, this is cold. A man in a suit sat at one of the tables, pushing his plate away. Maya approached calmly. I'm sorry about that. I'll bring you another one. It should have been right the first time, the man snapped. Maya nodded. I'll fix it. The man scoffed. You people always say that. Ethan's head lifted slightly. Something in his chest stirred. Familiar. Uncomfortable. Maya didn't react. She picked up the plate and walked toward the kitchen. The man leaned back in his seat, muttering under his breath. Ethan stood up before he even realized he was moving. He walked over to the table. You don't have to talk to her like that, he said. The man looked up, surprised. And who are you? He asked. Someone who sees what she's doing, Ethan replied. The man laughed lightly. Then you must not see much. Ethan's jaw tightened. She's fixing your problem, he said. That's her job. Doesn't mean you get to disrespect her. The man stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. Whatever, man. Just get my food right. Ethan held his gaze for a second longer, then turned away. Maya stood near the kitchen entrance. She had seen everything. Ethan walked back to his booth, sat down, his heart still beating a little faster. Maya approached a minute later, setting down his food. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Ethan looked up. Yeah, I did. She studied him, longer than she had in days, then said, That's not how this works. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? You don't get to step in and fix things, she said. Not like that. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just protecting me, she finished. Ethan hesitated. Yes, Maya shook her head slightly. I don't need that. Her words weren't harsh, but they were firm. I can handle people like him, she added. Ethan nodded slowly. I know you can. A pause. Then let me, she said. The words settled between them. Ethan leaned back slightly. Something in him shifted again. Understanding. Not everything needed to be fixed. Not everything needed him. Maya turned to leave, then paused. Without looking at him, she said quietly, But thank you. It was small, almost lost in the noise of the diner. But it was there, and it mattered. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He picked up his fork, took a bite, and for the first time in days, something felt slightly lighter, not fixed, not resolved, but moving, because maybe trust wasn't built in big moments. Maybe it was built in small ones, moments where you showed up, stayed quiet when needed, spoke up when it mattered, and learned when to do which. Outside, the night settled in again. The city moved forward, unaware, unchanged. But inside that small diner, something fragile had shifted. Just a little. And maybe. That was how trust began. Not with words, but with time and the willingness to keep showing up. Ethan didn't miss a day, rain or clear skies, long hours or short shifts. He was there. The diner in the morning, the community kitchen in the afternoon, driving in between. It became a rhythm, not the kind he used to live by. Meetings, numbers, deadlines. This one was different, slower, harder, real, and it didn't reward him the way his old life had. There were no deals closed, no applause, no recognition. Just work. And the quiet understanding that most of it would go unnoticed. But something inside him kept pulling him back every time. One evening, the wind came down sharp through the streets, carrying the first signs of winter. The sky had already turned dark by the time Ethan parked near the kitchen. He stepped out, pulling his jacket tighter. Inside, things felt different, quieter than usual, not empty, but heavier. Maya stood near the back table, her movements slower than usual. The usual steady rhythm she carried seemed off. Ethan noticed it immediately. He didn't say anything at first, just grabbed a stack of containers and got to work. People came through, same faces, same needs. But tonight, something felt strained. Even the conversations were shorter, quieter. When the last person left, the room settled into silence faster than usual. Volunteers cleaned up in near silence. Ethan wiped down a table, glancing over at Maya again. She leaned slightly against the counter, rubbing her temple with one hand, tired, more than usual. Ethan walked over slowly. You okay? He asked. Maya didn't look up right away. Yeah, she said, but it didn't sound like it. Ethan waited. She sighed. My brother's not doing great. Ethan felt something shift. You said he was sick, he said carefully. Yeah. She paused, then added, It's worse than we thought. The words landed quietly, but heavily. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't rush in with questions. He just stood there, present. Maya finally looked up at him. They want to move him to a different hospital, she said. Better care, more, everything, a beat, costs more too. There it was, the unspoken weight behind everything. Ethan swallowed. In his old world, this wasn't a problem. It wasn't even a conversation. But here, it meant everything. You'll figure it out, he said quietly. Maya gave a small, tired smile. Yeah, she said. That's what I keep telling myself. Ethan nodded. Silence settled between them again. But it wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken. Ethan's mind moved quickly. Numbers, solutions. He could fix this. Right now. One call, one transfer, done. Her brother would get the best care possible. No stress, no struggle. It would be easy. Too easy. His hand moved slightly toward his pocket, then stopped. Maya's voice from before echoed in his head. If you expect something, it's not really help, is it? And another. You don't get to step in and fix things. Ethan's fingers curled slowly. He pulled his hand back. Not yet. Not like that. I'll walk you home, he said instead. Maya shook her head. I'm fine. It's late. I've walked this street my whole life. Ethan didn't argue, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there. Maya watched him for a moment, then sighed. Fine, she said. But don't make it a big deal. Ethan nodded. Wouldn't dream of it. They stepped out into the cold night. The street was quieter now, the earlier rush gone. A few cars passed, headlights cutting through the dark. They walked side by side, not close, not distant, just together. For a while, neither of them spoke. Their footsteps echoed softly against the pavement. You ever get tired? Ethan asked finally. Maya glanced at him. Of what? All of it, she thought for a moment. Yeah, she said. All the time. Then why keep going? Maya looked ahead, because stopping wasn't an option. But she didn't say that. Instead, she said, because someone needs me to. Ethan nodded slowly. That answer felt familiar now. Different from his old life. But somehow, more honest. They reached her building. Old, worn, the kind of place people passed without noticing. Maya stopped at the steps. I'm good from here, she said. Ethan nodded. All right, she hesitated, then said, thanks, for today. Ethan looked at her. For what? She shrugged slightly, showing up. The words landed softly, but they meant more than anything she'd said before. Ethan nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. I'll be there tomorrow too. Maya studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. I know. She turned and walked up the steps. The door closed behind her. Ethan stood there for a moment, the cold air settling around him, the street quiet. He looked up at the building, then down at his hands, still empty, still capable, and for the first time, he understood something clearly. Helping wasn't about solving everything. It wasn't about being the answer. It was about staying, even when you couldn't fix it, even when it wasn't easy, even when it cost you something. Ethan turned and walked back toward his car. The city stretched out in front of him again, same as always, but he wasn't the same, not anymore. And somewhere, deep inside, a decision was forming, one that would push him further than he had planned, further than he was ready for, because now, this wasn't just about learning, and it wasn't just about her. It was about what kind of man he was going to be when no one was watching, and when it actually mattered. The morning came too early. Ethan hadn't slept much. The city outside his small rented room in the Bronx was already awake. Sirens in the distance, buses hissing at stops, voices rising and fading between buildings. But inside, everything felt still, heavy. His phone lay on the table, silent. For days he had ignored it, ignored the world he had left behind. But today, it felt different. Like something was coming, something unavoidable. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. Rougher now. Not the hands of a man who signed contracts and shook hands in glass towers. The hands of someone who carried weight. Real weight. And yet, they still held power. More than anyone around him knew. More than Maya knew. He exhaled slowly, then reached for the phone. The screen lit up instantly. Missed calls, dozens, messages stacked on top of each other. Board members, assistants, investors, and one name at the top. Daniel Reeves, his head of legal. Ethan hesitated, then answered. Where are you? Daniel's voice came through immediately, tight and controlled. Ethan leaned back slightly. I'm working. That's not funny. I'm not joking. A pause. Then Daniel lowered his voice. We have a serious problem. Ethan's chest tightened. What kind of problem? Bronx redevelopment project, Daniel said. It's moving forward faster than expected. Ethan frowned. What project? Silence then. The one your company approved 3 months ago. Ethan's stomach dropped. Which one? Daniel exhaled. The East River expansion, housing and retail development. Ethan stood up slowly. Where exactly? Another pause. Then, 3 blocks south of your current location. Ethan froze. 3 blocks. His mind moved fast. The diner, the community kitchen. Maya, he said quietly. It's already approved, Daniel replied. Demolition permits are signed. Tenants are being notified. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Tenants, small businesses, residential units, a few community spaces. Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't need more details. He already knew. That kitchen, he said slowly. Yes, Daniel confirmed. Ethan's chest tightened. And the diner? On the list. Silence fell, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan opened his eyes again. The room felt smaller now, colder. You didn't tell me, he said. You didn't ask, Daniel replied. You've been gone. Ethan turned toward the window, looking out at the street. People moving, living, unaware, lose everything, Ethan said quietly. That's how development works, Daniel said. You know that. Ethan didn't respond, because for the first time, he didn't agree. We can relocate some of them, Daniel added. Compensation packages? No, Ethan cut in. That's not the same. A pause. Ethan, Daniel said carefully. This project is worth hundreds of millions. Ethan let out a slow breath. And what's it costing? He asked. Daniel didn't answer because he knew. Ethan ended the call. The silence that followed felt louder than any noise. For a long moment, he stood there, thinking, remembering. Maya handing out food, Maya standing in the rain, Maya saying, someone has to. And now, he was the one who could take it all away, without ever meaning to, without ever seeing it. Until now. Ethan grabbed his jacket, left the room. The diner was already busy when he arrived. Same lights, same warmth, same rhythm, but now, it felt fragile. Like something that could disappear. At any moment, Ethan stepped inside. The bell rang. Maya looked up from the counter. Their eyes met. Something in his expression made her pause. You okay? She asked. Ethan walked toward her. We need to talk. Maya frowned slightly. About what? Ethan glanced around. People eating, talking, living. Not here, he said. Maya studied him, then nodded. Give me 5 minutes. Ethan waited outside. The cold air didn't bother him this time. His mind was too loud, too focused. 5 minutes later, Maya stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. What's going on? She asked. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at the woman who had given everything without asking. At the place she had built her life around. And the truth he had to say. My company, he said slowly. Maya's expression didn't change. What about it? Ethan swallowed. They're planning to tear this place down. Silence, the kind that doesn't move, doesn't breathe, just stays. What? Maya said quietly. Ethan nodded. The diner, the kitchen, the buildings around here. Maya stared at him. You're serious? Yes. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. There was none. When? She asked. Soon? Maya stepped back slightly, the weight of it hitting her all at once. This is our whole block, she said. I know. People live here. I know. They work here. They eat here. My brother. Her voice broke. Ethan felt it. Every part of it. I didn't know, he said. Not until this morning. Maya shook her head slowly. You didn't know that your company was about to destroy everything here. The words weren't loud, but they cut. Ethan didn't defend himself, because he couldn't. I can stop it, he said. Maya froze. The sentence hung in the air, heavy, complicated. You can? She asked. Ethan nodded. Yes, another pause. Longer this time. Then Maya laughed softly, not amused, not angry, just tired. Of course you can, she said. Ethan felt that. Deep, but the question is, she added, her eyes locking onto his, will you? The city moved around them, cars passing, people walking, life continuing. But in that moment, everything came down to one choice. Not money, not power, not reputation, just right or wrong. Ethan looked at her, at everything she stood for, everything she had shown him, and he knew. This was the moment, the one that mattered, the one that would define everything that came after. I will, he said, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. Maya held his gaze, searching, testing, trying to see if it was real. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, she said, but her voice carried something else too. Hope, fragile, careful, not fully trusted. Not yet, but there. Ethan turned toward the street, his mind already moving. Calls to make, decisions to undo, a system to push against. For the first time, not for profit, not for power, but for people, because now he finally understood something that had always been there, something he had just never seen until it was almost gone. The city looked different that morning, not because anything had changed on the outside. The same buses roared past, the same people rushed through crosswalks, the same buildings stood where they always had. But for Ethan, everything felt sharper, clearer, like a layer had been peeled back. He stood across the street from the diner, hands in his pockets, watching the door as it opened and closed with the rhythm of the morning crowd. People walked in, people walked out, unaware, still safe for now. Ethan pulled out his phone. No hesitation this time. He dialed. Daniel answered on the first ring. I was expecting your call. Ethan didn't waste time. Stop the project. Silence then. That's not a small request. I know, you're talking about contracts, investors, partnerships. I said stop it. The words came out steady, firm, different from the man who used to negotiate. This wasn't negotiation. This was a decision. Daniel exhaled. We'll lose millions. Ethan looked at the diner, at the people inside. At least, Daniel added. Ethan nodded to himself. Then we lose it. Another silence. Longer this time, Ethan. Are you sure about this? Ethan didn't answer right away, because this wasn't about being sure. It was about being right. Yes, he said, a beat. Then Daniel's voice softened slightly. I'll handle it. The line went dead. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the weight of money leaving. He felt something else. Relief. The news didn't spread right away. There were calls, meetings, arguments behind closed doors, people who didn't understand, people who refused to. But the order had been given, and Ethan didn't back down. He showed up to every meeting in the same worn jacket, the same quiet presence, and every time someone pushed back, he answered the same way. It matters, not numbers, not projections, not profit, just that, it matters. That evening, Ethan walked into the diner again. The bell rang. Maya looked up. Something in her expression shifted the moment she saw him, not guarded, not distant, different. What happened? She asked. Ethan stepped closer. It's done. Maya frowned slightly. What is? Ethan held her gaze. They're not tearing it down. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't move. Maya stared at him. You're serious? He nodded. It's over. The project's canceled. She didn't react right away, didn't smile, didn't speak, like her mind needed time to catch up. To everything? She asked. The diner, the kitchen, the buildings. Maya blinked slowly, the weight of it settling in. You did that? She said. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head slightly. No, he said. We did. Maya's eyes softened. Just a little. You didn't have to, she said. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he said. I did. A pause, long enough for something to pass between them. Not fixed, not healed, but changed. Maya leaned back slightly against the counter. You really gave all that up? She asked. Ethan shrugged. It wasn't really mine to begin with. She studied him. What do you mean? Ethan looked around the diner, at the people, at the space, at everything I built. I never stopped to ask what it was costing someone else, he said. Maya didn't speak. She just listened. And now I know, he added. Another pause, then Maya asked quietly, and what happens now? Ethan smiled faintly. Now, I keep showing up. Maya let out a small breath, a mix of disbelief and something softer. You really mean that, don't you? Ethan nodded. Yeah. Days passed, then weeks. The rhythm stayed, the diner, the kitchen, the streets. Ethan didn't leave, didn't disappear back into his old life. He stayed, worked, learned. Slowly things began to shift. Not in big ways, in small ones. Maya talked to him more, not all at once, but little by little. A question here, a comment there. The distance started to close. One evening, as they stood outside the kitchen, handing out meals under the fading light, a man approached Ethan. You the one who stopped that project? He asked. Ethan glanced at Maya, then back at the man. I was part of it. The man nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, then walked away. Ethan stood there, the words stayed with him. Thank you, not for money, not for power, for doing the right thing. Maya watched him. You're getting used to this, she said. Ethan smiled slightly. I think I am, she nodded. Good. A pause. Then she added, because we're not done with you yet. Ethan laughed softly. I wouldn't want to be. One night the kitchen was quieter than usual. The last few meals had been handed out. The air felt calm, peaceful. Ethan stood beside Maya watching the street. You remember the first time you came here? She asked. Ethan nodded. I was lost. Maya smiled faintly. You still are, she said. Ethan laughed. Probably, a beat. Then she looked at him. Really looked. But not the same way. Ethan felt that. Deep. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Silence settled again. Comfortable this time. No distance, no tension, just presence. Maya turned slightly toward him. Now I see you, she said. The words were quiet, but they carried everything. Everything he had been searching for. Everything he had almost lost. Ethan looked at her. Not as someone he needed to impress. Not as someone he needed to prove anything to. Just her. And for the first time, he felt whole. Not because of what he had, but because of what he had learned. The city moved around them, lights flickered, cars passed, voices rose and faded. But in that small space, under that soft glow of streetlight, there was something real, something steady, something that didn't need money to exist, because real wealth was never about what you could buy, it was about what you were willing to give when you thought no one was watching. Ethan didn't win her over with money or words. He earned it the night he chose to protect Maya's diner instead of his own fortune. And she finally said, Now I see you. This story isn't about wealth. It's about the power of action over intention. Because in the end, it wasn't what Ethan said that mattered. It was what he was willing to lose to do what was right. So today, think about one moment where you could step in, not with money, not with words, but with a real choice that costs you something. You don't have to be a billionaire to change a life. You just have to show up, like Ethan did. If this story touched you, comment one below. And tell me, have you ever done something kind that no one saw? But it changed you anyway? Stay with me. Because the next story might make you see someone in your life very differently.